You found the Backup Wrap-Up, your go-to podcast for all things backup recovery and cyber recovery. In this episode, we look at something most people I don't think have even heard of, but definitely need to know about, and that's the initial access broker. These are the bad folks that want to break into your network, but then just sell that access to whoever's willing to pay the most. They pick your lock and then hand the keys to somebody else. We have Dr. Mike Saylor from Black Swan Cybersecurity, my co-author, and of course Prasanna, to help break down how these guys operate, how they get your credentials, who buys them, and most importantly, what you can do to stop them. By the way, if you don't know who I am, I'm W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and I've been passionate about backup and recovery for over 30 years, ever since I had to tell my boss there were no backups of the production database that we just lost. I don't want that to happen to you, and that's why I do this. On this podcast, we turn unappreciated admins into cyber recovery heroes. This is the Backup Wrap-Up. Welcome to the Backup Wrap-Up. I'm your host, W. Curtis Preston, aka Mr. Backup, and I have with me Judgy McJudgerface, Prasanna Malaiyandi. How's it going, Prasanna? Feeling a little judgy today?
Someone needs to judge you and make sure that you are doing the right things and being most effective with your resources.
I didn't realize that I had appointed you CFO of my...
do you not know all the other things? Your non-advisor, financial advisor, your non-medical health person. Shall I continue going down the list, Curtis?
I'm just saying, for those that care, okay, is that I just had like a 5-minute phone call with Prasanna during which I felt very judged for starting a new cloud service, a new AI-based cloud service that I'm very excited about, called Fixer, Fyxer. Anyway, just saying, I felt very judged. Anyway, I'm moving on. We also have with us my co-author from the book, right over my left shoulder, and a blue team expert at Black Swan Cybersecurity. We have Dr. Mike Saylor. How's it going, Mike?
It's going well, guys. Thanks for having me.
Oh, can you judge Curtis now too? just start a conversation, and I think Curtis needs that sort of love all around.
Sure, I'll work that into the conversation.
I feel so judged. So today we're going to talk about. We talked about this a little bit, I think, in a previous episode, but it looks like this topic comes up enough that people just don't understand this entity or this type of, can we call it a business, Mike? Would you call it a business? It's a business, right?
It's a business.
Yeah. And that is an initial access broker. So why don't you start with this story that you used in the book as a case study about something that happened with one of your clients back in 2024?
Sure. We had a client call and say, someone broke into our stuff and we're not sure how, because we're not seeing any failed login attempts or weird logins from other places. We'd call those risky logins. So how did this happen? And so it takes quite a while to analyze even legitimate logins to figure out where the anomalies are. And so you narrow that down, you find out who patient zero might have been, and then you have to go talk to them because you don't have visibility or access into their whole life and things they have access to. But in that conversation with this employee, it turned out, and they were very open and almost somewhat naive about what they were telling us, which that's a whole other problem. So this user, we'll call them Bob. Bob's like, I don't know how my account could have been compromised. I don't think I'm the one that caused this problem here at work. But in discussion with him about just weird things that may have happened over the last several months or year, he says, now granted, this event was happening, October, November of a given year. And talking to this employee, he says, "Oh yeah, back in like April, around Easter, my personal email account was compromised, and I've just been fighting with Google to maintain access to my account and control over it. I keep changing the password. It keeps changing back. They keep, my recovery email keeps changing." And we thought, okay, well, tell us about how you use that personal account. Is it really just like, you use it when you sign up for stuff like a newsletter, or you go to Amazon and you buy something? He said, yeah, I do all that. Okay. And by the way, this is normal interrogation techniques. You ask the simple questions first, you build rapport, you get up to the sticky questions. And eventually I just said, so, what other type of information do you store in your personal account? And he goes, oh, well, everything. And I said, yeah, like what? Well, my work email and password, my bank information.
Oh,
And I said, okay, well, that's probably not good. And I said, okay, well, talk to me about how you do that. Did you have a question? So I was like, all right, so how do you store that stuff in there? Is it like in a spreadsheet? Is it a note to yourself, like a draft email? He says, oh no, I created a Google Docs folder called passwords. And okay. So that's what happened. Bad guys at some point compromised his account, likely through phishing or the compromise of some third party application or website, because this all trickles down. And bad guys go for they want to fish in a big pond, and then when they catch fish out of the big pond, they cultivate that and see what they have access to, and et cetera. So it's all kind of interconnected. But long story short, these bad guys are just going through the neighborhood looking for unlocked doors, or doors that are easy to pick and open. And once they identify those vulnerable and accessible uh, organizations or houses in this analogy, that's what they sell. They're like, hey, I picked this lock, I guessed that code, I've opened this door, I've established this access, and that's what they're selling. So they never go in the house, they never steal anything, they never use that access to for extortion or um, solicitation or even fraud. They're just gaining the access and selling it. And so in
so
this
they're
case,
hoping for large volume, I'm guessing, at that point, right?
yeah,
Where
usually or some exceptionally valuable access,
gotcha.
like admin
Like a
access,
celebrity or a
right?
politician or a specific organization
Yeah,
type of thing.
VIP or a high value target.
Or like
So
an
in this
like an
case,
administrative account, for example, at a right. Like
at
if
a
you,
bank or
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
critical infrastructure or something like that. Yep. Or a research institution. We've seen that over the last couple of weeks. Uh, so this initial access broker found this credential folder and sold it, and bad guys bought it and used the credentials to this subsequently this victim organization that called us for help, um, and those bad guys used that access to commit their attack.
Now I'm guessing that these initial access brokers, they probably gather up thousands, tens of thousands, whatever large number of credentials or initial sort of compromise points at these organizations or with these people. But it's not like they're just selling it to a single individual, right? Do they like take that same package and be like, hey, I'm going to sell it to you, I'm going to sell it to this other person, I'm going to sell it to this third person, where all these sort of buyers might have access to the same sets of credentials?
Well, so there is a bit of reputation here, believe it or not. So if I had 100 valid, and backing up a little bit too. So let's say bad guys found uh, a vulnerable organization, and maybe that organization is a mobile app. We all downloaded it. A million people downloaded this mobile app, and we've created an account. And a lot of us, being human, will use information that we coincidentally use in other places. So same password on this mobile app that we use for our bank. Horrible situation, but it happens. All right, so bad guys compromise this mobile app. They collect or harvest all of these, million credentials, if they want the true value out of those credentials, they will go and validate them. So out of a million, 90% still work. So they can sell 90% of those. They can either sell it as one big chunk, which is less likely. What they'll probably do is analyze that data set and look for commonalities. Like I've got out of 900,000, I've got 100,000 .edu or military or public organization emails, and they'll bundle that. So there's some relationship with that, because that's sometimes how threat actors work. They want to target something specific. All right, so they will bundle to some degree, but then to your question too, if I sold 900,000 to Curtis, would I also sell that same 900,000 to Prasanna? Well, maybe, but not likely, because if you found out, because maybe Curtis used that account first, and something happened and it got locked out, and that happened over a period of time, and then you go try to do it, and now they're not valid accounts, right? And so you can often find out that information's been sold more than once. Well, then you're not going to buy from that person again.
Yeah.
Right. It's
And
a
I think
reputation.
Yeah. And I think you had mentioned in a previous podcast episode, sort of, if it's like invalidated email addresses or whatever else, it might sell at a lower cost than sort of things that have been validated and verified.
Yep.
Interesting.
So very often, there's probably only a couple of different categories of initial access. Like there's just normal like email addresses. There's remote access. I think I might be getting ahead of Curtis's talking points here. Domain admin level credentials, and then credentials that would give us a broad foothold within an organization. So those range from $10 an account for just email all the way up to 100,000 plus for an entire organization.
Well, it would be like email and a password, right? Or email and a way to authenticate, right?
And that's right. So sometimes these happen in combination because of multi-factor authentication, right? So maybe I've got a company credential, and then the multi-factor goes to a personal email. So if I can, as an initial access broker, put those two pieces of valuable information together, I can sell that for more money.
Which again, why you don't use email as a method as multi-factor authentication factor.
Yep.
So yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. The people could be able to, again, this is their job, right? This is their entire, I'm going to mispronounce this, but the raison d'être, right?
Did better than me.
Yeah, the reason for being, right? And so they've figured out ways to increase the value of the different user IDs that they're trying to access, right? So that they can say, here's Curtis, and we know that Curtis uses his email address as, as his multi-factor. Then, these two go together, and that makes that package worth even more. That's very interesting. Okay. So we've talked about so far primarily username and password, and perhaps a pairing of email addresses. What other access methods might an IAB sell?
So it could be information like how to access something. So that could be IP address plus port number plus service plus protocol plus the necessary like VPN client. So information is also considered access if that's what's necessary to conduct the access.
So for that one, Mike, would it also be, as an example, say a threat actor is like, okay, I discovered something new in VMware, or take a software stack, right? And so would IABs be responsible then, or potentially be like, hey, let me scour the internet, find all of the public-facing VMware servers that are running X version, and give you back a list? Is that something an IAB would potentially?
So that's a little higher level.
Okay.
What they would do in that case. So as an example, let's just say the Fortinet 0 days that came out that allowed us to attack a firewall and gain a foothold and all that good stuff. It would be very easy to run an internet script to find all those vulnerable Fortinet firewalls, what an internet access broker would do is start to go one by one and actually exploit that vulnerability to gain the access, and then they would sell that persistent access. So that's not a credential, that's access. It's a live thread. Maybe it's running from a leased server or botnet. That's what they would then sell. So instead of credentials, it's a live
Remote
system.
access.
Yep.
So that's a vulnerability that was exploited, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole group of people that they discover these vulnerabilities, right? And then these guys watch for the announcement of these vulnerabilities, and they're like, okay, we're going to go scan for open whatever, right? And so we talk about, again, email, password, and now vulnerabilities of particular services. Anything else that there might be selling?
So it could be a compromised machine. So, let's say someone that writes malware, they get paid for malware. Someone that wants to gain access to a computer might buy the malware and hire or conduct phishing exercises, right? So now someone clicked on the email that got that had the malware in it, and now I've got access to a computer within an organization. So instead of access at the perimeter, I've got access on the internal network, and now I can sell that.
So the IAB itself writes the malware in that case and deploys it, if you will, and then sells to other people, hey, I have access to this particular computer within the organization.
So very similar to like a traditional burglar, right? They're going to break into a building. They've got all these different tools. They've got something that can fuzz a camera. They've got something that can pick a lock or disable alarm systems or social engineer somebody into letting them in the building, or pretending to be a vendor that now has access to the building to deliver a package that, so if you kind of think of it in real world terms, it is that burglar that can get into a building and facilitate access to something, and that's what they're selling. So they never leave with anything of value. They don't steal anything. They don't corrupt anything. They don't manipulate anything. They just create the access or sell the access. And another on the delivery part, because we've done when companies hire us to do red teaming, we've done some creative things too. One of the creative things that we did was we custom configured an iPhone. This was a long time ago. We custom configured an iPhone because we couldn't gain access through the perimeter of the company. And it was fairly well guarded as far as a campus goes. But what we did is we configured an iPhone and we shipped it to them. And it sat in their mailroom, turned on, and we hacked their wireless network from an iPhone and gained access to their network over the cellular data network through the iPhone. And so when you think of a kind of an out-of-band access attack, things like that are few and far between, but bad guys are creative. And another thing that you could do is, as far as the supply chain goes, is if they're ordering a bunch of computers, custom configure a computer, brand new, go buy a brand new Dell and put your malware on it. They did this with picture frames a long time ago. I don't know if y'all remember that. Those LCD picture frames, they came custom built with malware, so that they could spy on you and do other weird stuff. But
I would think that with these IABs, you talked about that their business, they're going after the stuff. I'm wondering the type of stuff you're talking about right there. It seems a lot more targeted. And where you say, I want to attack this company, right? Yep. And so I'm going to do whatever it is I need to do, right? I'm going to, like you said, send in. And we did a whole episode on this, by the way, of, do you remember what the title of that was, Prasanna? there was a whole episode about like creating devices that you put in there. It was a while ago, but this seems very targeted and almost personal. Is that something an IAB would do, or is that like a different type of organization?
It is, and to your point, though, or maybe to touch on that a little more, is that IABs or access brokers operate in a few different ways. And I guess it also depends on the threat actor. But so we can, as an IAB, we can search the internet, right, for weaknesses and what's out there. Sometimes an IAB just buys credentials from someone else that hasn't validated them. So then I'm going to go validate them and resell them as valid credentials. They do the same thing with credit cards and PII, like Social Security numbers and so on. But the other part of that is I can, as a more involved threat actor, maybe I'm going to go hire an access broker to find the access I need to a particular target. So that would be more targeted. So I want to break into this defense contractor. I'm going to hire an IAB to figure out the best way to do that, and then sell me the access they get.
So we had talked on a previous podcast episode about ransomware as a service.
Mm-hmm.
And so do these ransom as a service organizations also have their own IABs as an offering within that package, or do they typically sort of contract with other IABs that exist to gain that initial foothold and then they start?
Yeah, it depends. Some threat actors have a whole enterprise that does everything. You're in the IAB department. But then
so bonkers.
others will go out and source information based on the requirements or the need. So you could hire me as a ransom as a service threat actor. Part of that onboarding or that discussion will be determining if you have a target or a particular objective. If so, then I can go source that. I've got my Rolodex of bad guys, and I'll go find a access broker that can help me with whatever your particular needs are. If not, then I'll just go buy a blind list off the dark web for whatever, because you've already paid me my money as a service. I'm not too concerned if all that information's been validated or not.
Gotcha.
So let's talk about some of the ways that this happens, right? So with the stolen credentials, is this primarily phishing and similar activities?
It's not. So to be most effective at collecting credentials, you're going to go after a source that has a lot of credentials.
Okay.
And so, like Shiny Hunters is a threat actor group that's active right now, and they've been active for a while. And their claim to fame is, I believe, one of the largest data compromises in history, or part of it. It may have been them and another group working together. But what they've done is, again, realizing that we're all human and we reuse information all the time, instead of attacking your phone or your bank or your email for the one at a time type of value, they've gone to mobile apps and third-party apps that are really just for entertainment, realizing that an entertainment app's not going to have as much security as a banking app. And so if I can go and compromise that software company that built that game, like Talking Tom as an example, if I can compromise that and get access to the millions of people that have signed up for that app over time, very likely, high percentage wise, and I've actually got a chart for this that I did several years ago, so it's dated, but I think it's representative. The vast majority of credentials used in third-party apps mirror identically to the credentials people use at work.
Ooh.
Not just the password, but also the email. So they didn't sign up for Talking Tom with their personal email. They signed up for it with their military email or their .edu or whatever. And it just happened to be the same password. Because you know what? We're lazy. just easy.
Well, and also, I mean, doesn't that also mean that there's some vulnerability? And you started by saying that app possibly is not as security focused, but this means that if they're getting the username and password, that means that there's also vulnerability in how they're storing the passwords, right? Because normally you're going to get salted and hashed passwords, right?
This wouldn't be within the app. This would be an attack on the data store in the back end at the company. So they're not attacking the app, they're attacking the company.
Yeah, that makes sense. But again, the same concept applies, right? That perhaps they didn't use the best cybersecurity when creating the back end infrastructure, right?
Right. Well, and I know a little bit about the mobile app ecosystem, and it's all how much can I make with doing as little as possible. And with AI these days, I mean, it's crazy, but a lot of those apps aren't focused on security because there's really no security. And the only reason they're asking for credentials is so they can track you as a user to push advertising to you, which is how they make their money. So they're not security focused at all. So yeah, it's usually pretty easy, or it has been, to compromise those software companies to get access to the data.
All right, so you've got this. You're going after these third-party apps and sites and whatnot to get credentials, and that I get that because that's going to be like a large source of a large number of names and passwords, and then after that, is this now where we're talking about things like phishing?
Nope. Phishing is
killing me.
Lowest on the list,
really,
as far as credential harvesting goes.
It's just we talk about it so much.
Well, so phishing is it's usually intended for delivery, or affiliate.
I see what you're saying. Getting you to download the payload, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Or to redirect you to a website so an affiliate gets paid, or to drop your site or something like that.
Okay. All right. That's why we talk about it so much. All right.
And when you think about phishing, and I mentioned this in a prior episode too, and the numbers have changed, but it's relatively, and so I'm just going to say around, but give or take, maybe 5%. The success rate at phishing is around 22%. The success rate at collecting 1 million credentials by attacking a low security third-party app developer is pretty high.
Oh.
Yeah,
that's disheartening.
Okay, if phishing isn't next, what is next after going after the giant database of username and password? What's next after that?
So those would be the onesie twosie large organizations, but it's all the same strategy. It's how many, the one to many strategy. How many of these one singular attacks will result in this volume of credentials. And so, I'm not going to attack a small company with 10 employees. I'm going to attack a large company with 1,000 employees or 200,000 employees. And so the access broker then is going to strategize on the best way to do that. Is that maybe I get hired there, so now I'm an insider, and I just steal all the password database, the SAM database, or I go to work for a IT support company. And now, so that's one to many, right? So I'm an MSP that supports multiple clients, and so I have access into all these different environments, right?
Yeah,
so
there was a few years ago. There was that service provider for dentists, right? That they got hacked, and then basically you had access to all these dentists, right?
Yep. And so that remote access, the remote desktop access into those environments. And, there is a problem with that too, because a lot of times it's the same password. So as a support company, maybe I'm supporting Curtis's company and Prasanna's company, my credentials to log into your environments are the same.
Oh,
we see that a lot.
That's just wrong. But you brought up my ears.
Curtis's favorite.
picked up there. I heard remote desktop. RDP is like my favorite tool to pick on from a please stop using this the way you're using it. You want to talk about that a little bit?
So RDP, and there's been some.
By the way, that's the I call it the ransomware deployment protocol, but it's the remote desktop protocol. So
copyright pending.
RDP has some inherent issues that they've gotten better over time. I mean, back in the day, when an admin would use RDP to a server, you could capture those keystrokes live across the network and just replay it. But RDP in general is a pretty insecure protocol on its own. Well, what we've seen a lot, and bad guys understand this too, is sysadmins are using RDP across the internet when connecting in to do remote support after hours or on the weekends. I don't want to drive to the office and do this. I can just RDP. And so, I mean, it's not a good solution for remote support, but we still use it. Or actually, even in environments where we don't use it, that service is still turned on and available. And so I can
and accessible via the internet, which is just wrong, all kinds of wrong, right?
Usually, yep. So if you haven't customized your firewall to prevent certain protocols like RDP or FTP or Telnet through your firewall, that's something bad guys will find pretty quick. There's a search engine, and I don't think we've talked about it, but there is a search engine called Shodan, and there's free accounts and then there's the premium accounts, but you can search for any vulnerability, anything you're looking for. Shodan has already mapped the internet, the entire world internet. So when a new vulnerability comes out, you can go to Shodan and go, hey, show me all these Fortinet firewalls, and it will show you all of them and what ports are open and what services are running. And so
it's scary.
If you're not maintaining good hygiene, someone's gonna suggest you buy some deodorant.
So I like, basically stolen credentials from various, the one, it just kills me, the statement you made. And I know that, and I guess I shouldn't be surprised. The idea that people use the same username and password, everywhere. Right. And especially across personal and, corporate. Right. And we all know that you should not be having RDP publicly accessible, via the internet, right? There are other ways to do that. What can you think of other ways that they're grabbing? And by the way, that's just in general. I'd say any remote access thing like that isn't designed to be publicly accessible shouldn't be. So I'm looking at a list of concerns, and I see web shells. You want to talk about that a little bit?
So a web shell is, first of all, a shell is like a command prompt. So if you can, we call it popping a shell. So if you can get root, shell level access to a computer, a command line, which is usually more effective than the normal interface that we're accustomed to, clicking around and opening folders and that kind of thing. So shell access is that C prompt or admin prompt. The web shell is just access to a web-based environment. So whether that's like a cloud infrastructure like Azure or AWS, or it could be that cloud-based system. So maybe your financial system or your ERP is cloud hosted, or your bank account or whatever it is, your bank system, inventory systems. And so the web shell or web session would be a compromise of how that system, that website, that web portal, that web infrastructure authenticates. So whether it's you stole someone's session cookies and you can replay those or copy them or sell them, or it's persistent access. So for example, if I sit at Starbucks with my rogue wireless access point that says Starbucks this 5G plus, so you're going to use that one because it's faster than regular 5G, or I knock everybody off of the Starbucks one and they rejoin my fake one, and now all of that traffic is flowing through my fake wireless access point, and I can capture, especially if I'm watching you because I'm sitting next to you at Starbucks and you're logging into your bank or that website. I know traffic as it's flowing, and I can capture that stuff and potentially replay it or hijack it. And so now I'm in your session, and I kick you off, and now it's just me. So there's a lot you can do over the internet. Whether we would call some of those man in the middle attacks, where you started it, and I can see where you're going. I inject myself in the middle and manipulate traffic or replay traffic. So those are types of things you can do. But at the end of the day, it's what can I do to get me access to something that's valuable enough for me to resell? And the other question you mentioned about other things that they sell, and some of them are based on vulnerabilities. So vulnerabilities in Cisco VPN or Fortinet VPN or Citrix or some of these insecure protocols. Again, it's just spending the time to do the research to figure out who's vulnerable to these things, validating it by actually compromising the security through a vulnerability or known method, establishing some persistent access there, and selling it.
So, philosophical question, or maybe theoretical. So ransomware is prevalent, right? The number of attacks, right, have gone through the roof. If we focused all the efforts on eliminating IABs, would that make a difference?
Nope. It'll just make the other threat actors have to work harder, because right now they're just outsourcing it. It's like being a general contractor. You don't do all the work. You find the subcontractors to make your life easier, and you just put money. You mark it up.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But then in this case, if the IABs go away, then you just bring everything in-house.
Well, and that's the way it used to be. Everybody was kind of siloed in their profession. They were less capable because they were more focused on their skill set and their preferred attack methods and that kind of thing. And so then, as the cyber criminal ecosystem grew, you started having these kind of like cyber criminal conferences, and we got to know each other, and what can you do, and how can we work better together? And so there was a little bit of entrepreneurial demarcation activities going on. So now you've got this almost diversification. So and there was at the same time a bit of integration of physical security and cybersecurity. People that were really good at breaking into buildings and social engineering people and extorting them in real life could now work with cyber and to the benefit of one or the other. So now you've got a more dynamic, multi-layered threat. But yeah, once the bad guys started to recognize other bad guys and their skill sets, they started to go and watch. I know Bob the bad guy knows how to do that better than me. And
yeah, I can imagine that once you get really good, if you're really good at like getting credentials and gaining access and stuff, you're like, hey, I'm just going to do this. I actually know one of those entry guys, by the way, that does physical penetration testing. Basically, his job is to get into a room where he's not supposed to be, and then take a selfie and then get the hell out.
Yep.
But so we're kind of getting a little longer than I had intended. Let's talk about like the things that we can do. I think if you've been listening, if you've been paying attention, obviously, please don't, for the love of God, don't use the same password everywhere, right? And the more sensitive the thing is, the more that thing needs to have its own password. I mean, everything should have its own password, and you should be using password managers, but whatever. Let's please don't use the same password, sensitive stuff, right? And then also don't put RDP accessible via the internet. What was that, Prasanna?
Patching.
And patching, yeah. And vulnerabilities as they are, they're going to continue to happen. Monitor the CVSS, like for the CVEs for the vulnerabilities for your environment. And I can think of there was the big story that we covered with Rackspace a few years ago, where they were attacked simply because they didn't, on a timely basis, patch an advertised vulnerability. And within a matter of days, the bad guys were in their environment, and it destroyed their entire hosted Exchange environment. That was a bad story. You have any other takeaways, Mike, in terms of dealing with these IABs?
So change your credentials as soon as you think they're compromised. Don't wait till your employer calls and asks about your personal life. Don't store your credentials in plain text anywhere. Use a scheme for hints, to help you remember what the password is. Don't write your password down. Use a password manager if you can, and don't use coincidental passwords. I did find the data I was talking about earlier.
What's a coincidental password, by the way?
So a coincidental password or even credentials, is something that you use in more than one place. So if I use I love my dog at work, I don't use I love my dog anywhere else. All right. I did find the presentation I was talking about where the data was compromised. So in 2020, 37 billion records were compromised, which is more than the prior 6 years combined. And it was primarily and at the time, it was the largest data breach ever, over 80 million emails and PII records. And it was conducted by Shiny Hunters, who then sold 564 million record bundle, which was compromised across 49 different databases. And they sold for roughly $10,000. They broke it into 3 buckets and sold it for $10,000 each. But out of 564 million records, 1.12 million were unique email addresses related to where that person worked. So .mil, S&P 100, .gov, .edu, etc.
All right. Any final thoughts on IABs?
Turn it off when you're not using it.
Turn what off when you're not using it?
Everything.
Anything?
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. Thanks for being on, Mike.
Anytime.
Thanks for being on, Prasanna.
I judge you.
Judge you. All right. That is a wrap. The Backup Wrap-Up is written, recorded, and produced by me, W. Curtis Preston. If you need backup or DR consulting, content generation, or expert witness work, check out backupcentral.com. You can also find links for my O'Reilly books on the same website. Remember, this is an independent podcast, and any opinions that you hear are those of the speaker and not necessarily an employer. Thanks for listening.